I'm here on Borneo. Just behind me, the mountain you can see in the background is Mount Kuba, and I am just outside the Kuba National Park. This is just one site that my team and I are visiting as we conduct our research on the wonderful Southeast Asian flying lizards. Flying lizards, as the name suggests, they're perhaps most famous because they appear to fly. They have a modified rib cage which they can expand out, and they can glide for quite an extensive distance. I've seen lizards glide between trees that are tens of meters apart. And these lizards are quite small, so imagine them about the size of the palm of your hand. So tens of meters is actually quite a distance. Now that's all well and good, flying lizards, that's really, really cool, but the reason why we're particularly interested in these lizards is not so much because they fly, it's because of the diversity of species that we have in Southeast Asia, and in particular the diversity in behaviour and colour morphology. Now these lizards are territorial, so they use these visual displays that extend a colourful dewlap, it's a triangular piece of skin underneath the throat. They also use their wings in visual communication as well. The underside of the wings can actually be quite colourful themselves. And they also produce head bobs or push-up patterns. And they do this to advertise territory ownership. So a particular lizard might have a number of different trees inside his territory, and he advertised territorial ownership by producing these visual displays of colour and head bob movement. But importantly, they also use these visual displays to attract mates, and this is actually perhaps most important for these lizards as well as many other lizards. Now in animal communication, a general principle is that a signal must travel through the environment before it reaches the intended receiver, another animal. Now it's the properties of the environment that dictate the extent that those signals are going to degrade or be missed by that other animal. So if a signal is missed or not detected by another animal, then communication fails, so it doesn't work. Now as an example of the role of the environment can play in how animals communicate, I'm sitting here vocalizing, talking to you, and you may hear in the background you've got insects up in the trees and in the grass, but you've also got quite a bit of noise generated by this river that I'm sitting next to as the water runs over the rocks. Now that background noise, to compensate, I've increased the volume of my conversation. Now we know that in other lizards, they're communicating visually, but they have similar trouble with visual noise. So not acoustic background noise, but visual background noise. And this is the movement of the leaves and the trees, the foliage, the grass, the shrubs as the wind blows. And all that movement occurring behind the lizard is actually very distracting and can actually hide the head bob patterns as well as actually what would otherwise be conspicuous colour patterns. So visual background noise to compensate, lizards speed up their displays, and they also produce very colourful dewlap displays, the extension of a colourful throat flange. So that's an example of how the environment can play in animal communication, vocalizations, acoustic background noise, head bob patterns and colour patterns, with also visual noise in terms of wind-blown vegetation. Of course, habitat light plays a big challenge for visual communication as well. Obviously, if it's very, very dark, it doesn't matter what sort of signal you produce, your other animal is not going to be able to see you because it's so dark. So these lizards live in different habitats. Some live in the deep shade forests, others live in more open areas along edge environments up on the trees where there's a lot more light, but there might also be a lot more wind with wind-blown vegetation being a problem. So one of the hypotheses that we're testing is whether the different types of habitats that each species lives in of these flying lizards, is that a reason to account for why there is such diversity in both colour patterns but also their displayed behaviour. The horned gliding lizard, Draco cornutus, it would have to be my favourite Draco species. Males are a gorgeous emerald green and they have tiny horns above their eyebrows as if they are little green devils, hence the name cornutus, which in Latin refers to having horns. This species also exemplifies many other animals in that males are conspicuous in an effort to effectively defend territories and to attract mates. Females, on the other hand, often don't have to do that and are instead trying to be cryptic, which helps to avoid predation. Now, this type of sexual dimorphism, here in the context of colour, where the sexes look different, is quite common in the natural world. In many animals, including many gliding lizards, sexual selection resulting from competition among males over territories, or as a result of female mate choice, has driven the evolution of elaborate male traits. For example, here, male colour and ornamentation. And it's variation in the intensity of this selection that we're particularly interested in, because it might account for the remarkable diversity we see in morphology and behaviour among different species of gliding lizard. Now, studying these lizards is not straightforward, and for several reasons. They are often very hard to find, and this is another reason why I like Draco cornutus, because males at least are a bit easier to spot because of their bright coloration. But even for this species, you've got to spend a lot of time walking through the environment, carefully looking through the trees trying to spot a lizard. Once we find a lizard, we can then set up a video camcorder and record the behaviour of that lizard. With this video, we can use sophisticated motion analysis software back at the lab to break down behaviour into parameters that we can statistically analyse, and in particular, the speed of display movements. We can also estimate the speed of the visual noise occurring in the backgrounds that's created by wind-blown vegetation. To study colour, we have to actually catch the lizards, which is a challenge even when we can find the lizards. They are gliders after all, so when we're trying to catch them, they will often try to escape by gliding between the trees. We also have to use extremely long fishing poles with a tiny noose on the end, because these lizards are often high up on the tree trunks. Once we've caught a lizard, we can measure their colour using a machine called a spectrometer. Now, colour is often seen very differently by animals compared to humans. For example, gliding lizards can see into the UV and are sensitive to different types of colours than we are. So we use this spectrometer to accurately measure the colour of these lizards, and we can then model it depending on how the lizards actually see that colour. We can then use that data to analyse, for example, to what extent the sexes differ in their coloration, but also to what extent different species differ in their colour morphology and how this relates to the type of environment these lizards typically hang out in. What we find is lizards living in different types of habitats appear different in their colour and different in terms of the types of head bob movements that they use. For example, depending on how dark it is, depending on the type of colour environment it is, are there lots of greens or is it mostly browns, but also the extent there is visual noise in terms of wind-blown vegetation. All of this will determine the types of colours or movements that are conspicuous to rivals and potential mates. So the physical environment has driven a lot of the diversity we see among different gliding lizard species, and this is because selection is driving the evolution of these attributes in order for lizards to maintain an effective means of communicating with one another.